Hello, my name is Victoria Fricke. I am the owner and lead destination wedding curator at Vic's Vacations. We are a travel agency based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. My specialty is certainly in the romance space, honeymoons, and of course, destination weddings. And I think my favorite part about destination weddings and why I'm so drawn to them is the experience that I have with the couples that I plan, because it's really something special to start with an idea of, I think I want to have a destination wedding, and to work and guide with these couples along the way to help them create a vision, find the perfect resort, identify the number of rooms they're going to need, and ultimately land on a exact idea of what their wedding will look like, and then to see that actually come into fruition. So my goal today is to just chat with you a little bit about budgets, expectations when you're planning a wedding, what kind of things you should put your money into, some things you can let go of, and ultimately allow you to have a better idea of what you need to think about when it comes to budgeting for a destination wedding. So let's chat. What is the average cost of destination wedding, and how can we calculate our own budget? So destination weddings, no two are exactly alike, and that's really important with this conversation. So 10 people going to a destination wedding in Mexico is going to look a lot different than 70 people in the Amalfi Coast. I would say on average, if you were looking at a tropical wedding in a Caribbean, Mexico destination, you're probably looking at a range of $10,000 to $30,000. That would be probably the realistic price point that most of our couples end up with. A lot depends on the number of guests that you have attending and how many extras you have, right? Is it a really basic beach setup, or is it one that has all the bells and whistles and fireworks and a live band? Certainly those weddings can soar to, six figures as quickly as you'd like, but we can also get them to be extremely budget friendly. And as long as you have your priorities lined up of what your goals are and what you intend to spend, your travel advisor and your wedding planner can really kind of come together to help maximize that budget. What is a realistic timeline for planning a budget-savvy wedding? The goal for destination weddings across the board is a year plus. We really want you to think about that year out mark, because that allows us to get inventory for your hotel rooms along with getting the date that you prefer. So especially if we're looking at peak season when everyone is trying to escape the cold potentially in February and we want to get married, we want to make sure we have enough time to not only get your ideal wedding date and venue, but we want to make sure that we can get the best price for your rooms. Those will all come into play, ultimately helping your budget. How much should couples expect to put down for their initial deposit, and how much is refundable? So the hard part with weddings is the initial upfront cost is something people don't always think about. So on average, if you're doing a tropical destination wedding, you can expect to spend between $500 to $2,500 to have a deposit for your wedding. So the wedding date and the locations, that's going to be with the resort. It's not refundable, but it can and it does go towards your total package cost. So you're just paying a deposit that you'll utilize later. As far as your room block, this is another cost. So on average, we're going to look at around $100 per room as your deposit. That is refundable in a lot of cases up until a certain amount of time. So if we do book further out and we have a deposit, say of $3,000, that will be refundable in many instances up until a deadline. So the earlier you plan, the higher probability of having a refundable deposit. What are the biggest mistakes that couples make with wedding budgets, and how can we avoid them? I think one of the misconceptions is that you have to have deposits for a destination wedding. I don't think a lot of times couples are thinking about putting money down when they commit to a destination wedding, but just like securing a wedding venue and a photographer and catering, a lot of times there are deposits when you're stateside as well. So certainly keeping in mind that you're going to have at minimum a few $1,000s in deposits that you're securing when you lock in your wedding date and when you lock in your room block is something that couples sometimes can make mistakes by not knowing. And when they do that, they can sit and allow their wedding date to get taken by another couple who was maybe prepared. Another misconception would be that you don't need a lot of time and that you can do this pretty quickly. While we can pull off destination weddings in speed and ultra lighting speed if we need to, it is less than ideal because your guests don't have adequate time to make payment plans if they'd like, or oftentimes they might have to actually make their payments in full at time of booking, which is never ideal. So the further out we book, the more chance we have for deposits to be spread apart and for payment plans if your guests need that. All-inclusive versus villa. Which option gives us the best bang for our buck budget-wise? This is a question that gets brought up quite a bit because the idea of a villa wedding is really enticing because ultimately it is this exclusive feel. It seems really elegant. And while it is, the hard part with a villa is that everything has to be brought in. So your chairs, your tables, the lighting, the stands for the lighting, of course, all the food, the plates, all of the details for this wedding will have to be brought in. And if your budget is endless or we're within budget, it's certainly a great option. And villa weddings are a really unique thing. The flip side, though, is with a wedding package at an all-inclusive resort, for example, a lot of these things are already included. The food your guests are eating, unless you are increasing and going towards a more specialty dining situation, is going to already be included with what your guests are spending. The alcohol, same thing. And so there is quite a bit of a package bundled price that you have at an all-inclusive, which really allows you to budget appropriately. If you feel confident that you are not adding a bunch of extras to a package, your package price stays as is. But when you're going with a villa, well, we're kind of just building and the budget just increases and increases along the way. So I would say if your budget has flexibility, a villa is a great option. But if you're really honing in on sticking to a budget, I think you're going to be able to do that a lot easier at an all-inclusive property. What are the most affordable destination wedding locations and where can we find the best destination wedding packages under $10,000? Mexico, Caribbean. So Mexico and the Dominican specifically are fantastic locations for keeping your budget under $10,000. As a couple, you really have to make sure that you are focusing on what your vision for the wedding is. If we're going under $10,000, there are a lot of extras that you will probably not have the ability to add on. However, your wedding package, especially if it is a smaller wedding, will have a lot of room for the things that you are probably innately going to be including in your wedding. So an arch or a trellis, some simple flowers and simple decor. Of course, the tables, the chairs, the white linens. As long as you're not going fully into all of the decor as a couple and you're going with a more minimalistic approach, if your size of your wedding is, I would say, 50 or less, you can easily pull off a $10,000 wedding. But Mexico and the Dominican is where you're going to find that is going to be the easiest to do. What are the best tropical and budget-friendly alternatives to destinations like the U.S. Virgin Islands? The thing is, there is a budget alternative for almost every destination. It just has to match what your goals of that destination are. So if you want to go to the U.S. Virgin Islands and you can articulate why, maybe it is the way the foliage looks, maybe it's the way that the beach looks, maybe it's the coves you see, and this little bit more boat-friendly looking experience for your wedding. If you can articulate your desires that you have with that more luxe destination, we as travel professionals can help find an alternative in a more budget-friendly location. The thing is to identify what your goals are in that destination so we can find a way to pivot to one that is a little more budget-friendly. Can we plan a 70-guest wedding for under $10,000 and still keep guest trip cost low? Yes. Yes, you can. So one of my favorite parts of a destination wedding, hands down, are the perks that you as the couple are able to earn. What do I mean? So in many group contracts that we do room blocks for every, say, 10 rooms you book, you will earn one free. Let me repeat. For every 10 rooms you book, you will earn one free. Usually it's up to 3 or 4 rooms. It depends on the season, the time of year, the resort brand, and of course, how many guests are coming to your wedding. But most of our couples earn between 2 and 4 rooms comped. It's less taxes and fees, but if you have $1,000 room as your cheapest room and you have 3 of those and we've earned 3 rooms, maybe we earn back $2,100 that you have earned as comp rooms. That allows you to build into your budget. So even though we're climbing up in that guest count, you now have money that you're going to get back after travel that you've earned from comps by having a room block and working with a travel advisor to help you support that room block. When you have these freebies that you've earned in your contract, that money is refunded back to your credit card or potentially in check form post-travel. So the last minute final swipe of your credit card to pay off the remaining balance of your destination wedding usually hits around that same cycle, and you can kind of use the perks that you earn from your group room block towards your destination wedding. Other ways to maximize your budget are going to be, a lot of times we can negotiate for you a free cocktail hour or free upgrades for you, the couple. So there are some things that we can do in your wedding room block and in your contract to allow you to earn money. Yes, earn money by the guests that choose to attend your wedding, which you can use to help kind of soften the cost of the total cost of your wedding. As far as keeping guest price low for those that are attending, it's just really important to think about what you think the ideal spend for your guest to attend your wedding is, and then your travel advisor will really focus on resorts that match that. Of course, we want to make sure your vision is the priority though, so we will suggest maybe a 3-night stay for some of your guests, or if they're single occupancy, doubling up with a friend. But there are certainly locations that we can provide to you and resorts that have a lower price that still match your want, kind of keeping everybody happy. How do we balance guest affordability with our dream vision? A great question that a lot of couples have to kind of finagle. So your job as a couple is to identify what your vision is. Your secondary task is to ensure that those that you love and care for most can make it and can afford to come. So I always advise couples to talk with their closest friends and family first and get an idea of what they're willing and able to spend on a trip. Usually during the quoting process, your travel advisor will tell you the cost for a guest to attend your wedding when you're looking at different properties. So maybe you have your top 2 resorts that you're looking at. You'll know what a, say, 4-night stay looks like for your guests to attend. You can take that number back to people in your group, not everyone, but certainly the people that you would be just heartbroken if they couldn't make it, and say, does this match your price point? If it doesn't, can we drop that down to 3 nights for them? And if it still doesn't beyond that, then it might be a conversation about not everybody can come to the wedding. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes for couples, is that while you are planning for this really special day, not everyone in your closest circle always can make that sacrifice to come financially. But the goal that your travel advisor will have, of course, as well as you will have, is to really narrow down a resort that does fit both, gives you your ideal destination wedding vision that you have, and also is able to make sure that all of your guests feel comfortable attending. One thing that you as a couple can do is find ways to give back or support some people in your group. So if you earn free rooms with your room block contract, there might be one person in your family that is struggling to pay for their trip. And maybe you can use some of your refund to help pay for that room, or you can help offset the cost a little bit. My dream wedding destination is the Amalfi Coast, but how can I tell if my friends and family will be able to afford to attend? We plan quite a few weddings in Italy. Amalfi Coast is absolutely beautiful, and it's a great location for a destination wedding. So the advice that I would give you is to, number one, make sure that you have talked to the most intimate members of your family first to make sure that they can take the amount of time off work that is required to truly go to Europe, and that they have the financial capabilities to go to a wedding in Europe. The reality is, when we're talking about going to Europe, most people will not just fly in for the wedding. They're going to make it a vacation. Of course, some will, but for the most part, the draw of a wedding in Europe is going to be your friends and family get to go to Europe. So I would ask your travel professional that you're working with to share some sample itineraries. So we always provide sample itineraries, what it would look like in a just generic form to go to Italy for a week. So if you're getting married in Ravello, then we might say 3 nights in Ravello, and then we would build a sample trip cost around those 3 nights in Ravello, showing you maybe what it looks like to also go further up the coast to Sorrento or to Positano, and then maybe out to Rome. But that would give you a sample price point to show your friends and family that are coming initially, hey, would you feel comfortable spending $8,000 as a starting point to attend our destination wedding, plus air. And if you get a lot of resounding no's, then it might be something to rethink or to come to the conclusion that you might have a smaller wedding or elope in Europe and then do something when you're back at home. But a travel advisor can certainly help give you some guidance there. But the biggest thing to think about is most people are going to come for a longer period of time. It's definitely a higher investment price point for your guests, and they have to have the time off work to be able to fully attend. How do you have European weddings without breaking the bank? Ugh. So a European wedding is not going to be cheap. Most of the time, they are going to be the same price as a destination wedding in the United States, if not more, because of the outsourcing typically that you're doing to bring elements together. The biggest component that I can say is to, number one, work with a wedding planner that can help take on the lift of finding all of the vendors and finding ones that work together and work with the venue that you're picking. Finding a venue that has chairs and tables and linens already included. Maybe there's already lighting strung. Maybe they offer packages for food and drink. That is going to be huge. So with venues that have inclusions already, you will save a ton of money versus finding a location that you have to outsource everything for. But your wedding planner, whether it be a stateside wedding planner, one included in a travel agency, or one that you find local in Italy, is certainly something that you're going to want to rely on a lot, so you're not piecing everything together, that they can work to bundle things for you. But that would be the biggest advice to keeping things at a reasonable cost, is to make sure you have support and you have things included already. When is the best time to book for maximum savings, and what are some of the benefits for booking midweek or during shoulder season? I love shoulder season. I think the fall in particular, if you're going to Mexico or the Caribbean, is a great time to get married because the price point for your guests goes down. And most of the time, the weather is going to be wonderful. So the trade-off, of course, is that it's hurricane season and you have to be flexible and be willing to pivot. However, I can tell you from experience and from having multiple destination weddings, of course, in hurricane season, it usually rains on and off, and it might rain in the morning, but during the afternoon or evening, it clears up. The savings, though, the price point for your total cost for your trip and for your guest experience is going to go down, though, significantly. And you'll have the ability for more space, especially if you have a larger destination wedding. As far as midweek, this is a great way to save money on premier locations. So there are many resorts that have premium locations that cost $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 for the venues themselves, because they either privatize an area for you or shut down a section of the resort, meaning they've kind of taken away some of the experience for other guests by really focusing on yours. And so there is a cost for that. However, a lot of times that cost is a weekend cost base, or the cost is a lot higher over the weekend. So if you can have a wedding on a Monday versus a Saturday, you're still using the weekend for PTO for your guests, and you are not paying that hefty venue fee. So I think it's a great option for budget-savvy couples. Is it more cost-effective to fly in vendors or hire ones that are local? This really depends. And I would say fly in or bring in the ones that you cannot imagine using someone else. This is usually going to be your photographer and hair and makeup. That's something that oftentimes our couples really want to have full control over, and they don't want to leave to chance. Absolutely fine. We can use those free rooms that you're going to get in your wedding room block to help cover their stay. And a lot of times couples are able to negotiate partial trades with some of their vendors that way. The other vendors, though, I would really rely, especially if we're talking a tropical resort wedding, I would rely on the resort to help you get. They have amazing relationships with incredible vendors. Oftentimes they have multiple vendors you can choose from. But the thing with that is the vendors know the property. The wedding planners in the destination know the vendors, and that creates a significantly more cohesive space. So if there is a last minute rain shower that pops up, everyone is working together effectively because they've done it before. So the wedding the florist is aware of what's going on with the lighting and the sound, and they are working together. Everyone is communicating, and it doesn't allow for some of the snafus that can happen when you go find your own vendor. So I would say work with your travel advisor, but also really work with your wedding coordinator in destination to help you ensure that you are getting the right vendor. Of course, look at the cost analysis, and that's something that if you have a destination wedding planner, they can help you with. But looking at the cost of bringing someone in versus using the ones on property, even if it's a close price point, a lot of times using the ones that the resort offers and suggests is going to be a better route. How do we get a luxury look on a budget, and which venues offer a luxury feel with minimal decor? Luxury, of course, can be defined many ways, but I think from my experiences, many of the venues that feel the most luxurious are the ones that are maybe premium locations that do have a higher cost, but the yield is a look that is really exclusive. And I would say maximizing and using the non-peak weekend days to help you do that is a great way to stretch your budget. But I think ultimately finding space that has foliage already or has something that's really eye appealing that you don't have to zhuzh up too much. When you start spending thousands and thousands of dollars on floral, that starts to add up. But when there is a backdrop that is already built in, a lot of resorts have arches that are already there and you don't have to pay to bring in. Even just $1,000 of floral on an arch can do so much. Or lighting that you bring in or maybe is already there, mixed with the greenery and the leaves is a great way, I think, to give you a private, intimate feel, which always does seem to feel a little bit more exclusive. Lighting, I will say, is one thing that creates a mood and creates a luxury feel. It's not a ton of money to add just a little bit of lighting, and I would say that's a great way to stretch your budget a little bit and provide something that creates a mood that is going to define the luxury feel that you're probably looking for. What is the best bang for your buck upgrade that instantly elevates a wedding? So I do think lighting is something that you can add, and it really creates an environment that is wonderful, especially, of course, for the reception. Flowers is something that I think really can go a long way. And one thing I want to stress is the resorts are really good at repurposing floral. So if you spend money on some really beautiful focal pieces for your wedding, those resort wedding planners will either use those for head tables or use them for other decor throughout the reception. But I've seen them just take apart that beautiful floral arrangement, creating smaller arrangements for later. And so they're really good at repurposing the floral to extend one original focal point that you had for your wedding and use it in other places throughout the reception, allowing you not to have to buy flowers twice, but one time and have it purposed twice. I think chairs is something really beautiful. White chairs are typically included with most resorts, but you can have wooden chairs, which I think just adds something so luxury in just the way that they feel. And I think music, live music is something that people really like. Bands can certainly be expensive, but a violinist or a cellist or just a saxophone player is a great way to add a mood that is a little bit fun and unique and maybe something you don't see every day. And I think that's something that you can add that instantly kind of elevates your wedding experience. Is it feasible to have an American Indian fusion wedding in Europe for $110,000 for 300 guests? And what trade-offs do you have to make that happen? Yes, it is possible. Of course, that doesn't include any travel. So the biggest thing would be to make sure that all guests coming are okay with the price point for a trip to Europe. But it certainly can happen, and it is not out of the realm of possibility. The thing to keep in mind is some Indian traditions a lot of times have costs associated with them. And it's imperative that we were to analyze your budget of which portions are going for which day of the event, because typically an Indian wedding will have multiple days to it. And what are we able to repurpose throughout the trip? Using one space for multiple events, if we can get away with one setup fee initially or minimal setup fees as we change spaces, but we're not renting chairs multiple times, we're renting them once, etc. So if you are doing a very large wedding in Europe, it would just be really important that, number one, we have a really good venue that has the space and has elements already included. And number 2 is that we are planning definitely ahead of time to ensure that we have enough space locally and with the proximity that you're looking for your guests to be able to get enough hotel space. Because unlike a destination wedding in a tropical destination or in the States, we are in potentially really small towns and areas where we'd have to go across multiple hotels and navigate, of course, all the transportation for your guests. So we would just have to be prepared and have enough time to pull it off. But could we? Yeah, we could. Anything's possible as long as you're realistic in what your expectations are and you allow us to guide you in the way that makes the most sense financially. So I hope you learned a few things about budgets for weddings. The thing to stress is I didn't give you a magic answer that a destination wedding costs X and you need to save Y. There's no perfect formula because no 2 weddings really are the same, just as no 2 couples or love stories are the same. So when you're ready to begin planning your destination wedding, the biggest tips that I would leave you with are start planning early. Find a travel professional that is willing to listen to you and advocate for you and support you, helping you navigate all of the questions that you're going to have around planning. And allow yourself to realize your goals can be achieved at any budget as long as they can be realistic with the number of guests that you have. And you can find variations of maybe your end goal if we're outside of budget. So I hope that helps. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer more. And best of luck planning your destination wedding.